Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's the Fantasy Knuckleballers here. I'm Justin. I'm here with Rich and Aaron. This week, we're going to talk about the streaming hitters, the streaming pitchers. We talked about last week splitting those up. So when we talk about the pitchers, we're gonna split up starters versus the long relievers. And then we're going to kick it off with our special topic this week. We're going to talk about the NL Central and, what we expect going forward, which teams are going to buy, which teams are going to sell, and what stuff to look out for and how that's going to affect fantasy. So to kick it off, we're going to start off here with the streaming hitters. So this is for week 10. So this is for the week starting May 31st, I believe. Yes. Yep, Monday, May 31st. So when we compiled this list here, we really concentrated on two things. One, or actually three things. One, number of games. Two, matchups, and three, at-bat possibilities, mostly due to injuries. So first one here we're going to look at is Brad Miller, a very versatile guy, multi-position eligibility, which at this point that's a huge factor in my decisions when adding people, just because of the roster versatility that it gives you. So Philly's got 6 games next week. They're at Cincinnati and they're home at Washington, and then the injuries are continuing there with Harper just going on the IL. So look for Miller to continue to get at bats there in that lineup with some pretty strong matchups. So next we got Jonathan Villar, and again, this is a guy who the Mets are just facing a plethora of injuries here, and they just put Peter Alonso on the IL yesterday or today. So they have 7 games on the board next week. Again, this is favorable matchups here at Arizona. Not so much at San Diego, but you're talking about 7 games. You're talking about a guy who's with the amount of injuries that they have, he's probably going to get a fair number of at-bats in that lineup. And then, again, just like Brad Miller, Villar is a guy who's got multiple position eligibility, so he gives you that versatility to move him around your lineup, based on the other injuries that you have on your current roster. Next, we got Lucio Dubon. So, again, injuries here. The Giants just put Brandon Belt on the IL today. San Fran has 7 games on the board next week. We got at LA and at home versus Chicago. We're talking about 7 games here in a Giants lineup that's still pretty hot. They're still putting up a pretty good number of runs. And he had a really strong year last year. So he's had a really strong 2 weeks. So, I'm expecting him to keep up what he's been doing there. Pretty low owned at this point, so he's going to be available in a lot of leagues. Next, we have Edmondo Sosa with the Paul DeJong injury. This guy's was called up, and he's been money for a week and a half now. Batting like 370 something, and if you look at the roster construction of the Cardinals, they're slowly moving him up the lineup. They have no other choice. This guy's tearing it up. He batted 5th today, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him if he keeps hitting to move him up on top of the lineup at least until DeJong gets back, which he's going to be out at least 10 more days from what I've read. They have 7 games on the board against LA and against Cincinnati, so the Cincinnati matchup is really favorable. And then LA, I think he faced at the bottom end of the rotation there, if I remember correctly. So again, more good matchups on a guy that's really, really low owned and has been performing really well, and is going to at least play through next week. So the last one on the list here is Kyle Farmer. He's kind of an underappreciated guy. He's quietly having a good year. Again, injuries, the Reds just put Senzel on the IL. He's going to have knee surgery, out 4 to 6 weeks. So that leaves more room for them to move guys around and get Farmer some more at-bats. He's performed well so far. He's got a few different positions he can play. And, again, you got 7 games on the board, so I expect him to get a fair number of at-bats with some pretty favorable matchups there. Guys, thoughts on this list?
Yeah, I mean, I love Villar if you can get him. I think a lot of leagues he's probably already at least on somebody's bench. The guy I like out of him is Dubon, and it's probably based on one factor, at bats. He got 24 at bats last week. I expect him to get at least 24 at bats this week and possibly next week. So if I got to plug a spot, he's eligible in our league at second base and outfield. He's somebody I can plug in the outfield or plug in the infield. I like him. If I'm looking a little bit longer term or I'm looking for a little more pop, I love Brad Miller in the short term too. If you're needing pop and you're just, he's not going to give you a ton of at bats. He's going to give you probably 13 to 15, 16 at bats a week. But every now and then he's going to launch one deep, and you sometimes you need those homers to help you help your stats. From a long term perspective, I really like Sosa. I really like that pick because he's somebody that's gradually gaining more playing time, and the same with Farmer. They're both gaining more playing time. If the teams are comfortable with them in those positions, both those guys could move up and take over a full-time role in the future. What do you think, Aaron?
Edmondo Sosa wasn't even on my radar until Justin brought him up. But the more I think about it and the more I look into his numbers, the more he should be on everybody's list. Just from, if nothing else, like his 375 batting average doesn't do anything for you. Think about this. The Cardinals have a history of bringing up these quote unquote no name middle infielders. DeYoung, Edmond, both of them were really nowhere on anybody's radar, but they came up and they're fantasy relevant, and they really go out and help your team win fantasy championships. And from that standpoint, plus the fact that St. Louis is still struggling in the outfield, they did have a couple injuries there in the outfield. If DeJong comes back, I could see somebody transitioning to the outfield.
Good point.
And so, like I said, if he's hitting, they're going to find a way to get him in the lineup, regardless of what position it is. So, yeah, I'm Sosa's an excellent pickup, and I think it's a good long-term stash. Dubon, I'm not so high on. He's okay if you're in a pinch. Villar, I think Villar, his stock can't be any higher than it is right now. We've been talking about Brad Miller for weeks. Kyle Farmer, his batting average isn't anywhere close to being good, but he is getting some good power numbers, some RBIs, especially when he's playing at home. There is value there if you're in a pinch, and even besides these 5 here, there's injuries all around the league, and we mentioned some, but it seems to be like a plethora. Every team is having issues with this. Keep looking at these waiver wires and looking at guys that are put into positions to succeed. And like I said, there's going to be a plethora this year of these guys that you can plug and play.
And you brought up a great point with Sosa. I mean, if there's one team in the league that we all seem to undervalue their prospects, it's St. Louis. I mean, if you look at the Rosarina in Tampa Bay, look where he is now, where he was 2 years ago.
I didn't bring him up. You did, Rich. For the record.
And then look at Garcia, Adolis Garcia out of Texas. He was a no-name prospect from the Cardinals, got traded, got playing time, and now he's on the verge of being a star. I mean, so
the Cardinals could really use him this year.
They could use both of them, but I mean, look at Sosa. He's kind of that undervalued foreign prospect that we don't hear a lot about. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and he might be a hidden value of speed too, because he's already got 2 or 3 steals and just a few at he's still under 40 at bats. He's already got a couple steals. And also, again, he's a guy who's got second base, third base, and shortstop eligibility already. So
He might get outfield before the end of the year.
Brady.
He might get outfield before the end of the year. All right. Good list, Justin. All right. So we're doing a little bit different for pitchers this week. I'm not going 2 start versus 1 start. I'm going to give you a list of starters, and then I'll give you a list of relievers that could help you out. John Gantt, he's first on my list. He went out and I believe he pitched today. He pitched 5 innings. His whip's a little high, but he did pitch against the White Sox, who the Cardinals have been struggling against in this series. They went out and got the win, gave up 5 hits, 3 walks, no runs. That's a pretty good stat line against a good hitting White Sox team. Next week he gets the Dodgers. Not a great matchup. They are supposed to get Bellinger back, but they seem to be a little off as far as their offense goes. He's a good, I think, a long-term play. He's going to get plenty of time with Mikolas on the shelf and all their other injuries. So I think Gantz, maybe if you are a little chicken and want to hold him off next week, but I'd go ahead and pick him up and play him for the long term. Cody Poteet from Miami. This one's really intrigues me. So he's a rookie that came up because of all their injuries. In his last outing, he pitched 7 innings, 3 hits, no walks, no runs, 4 strikeouts, got the win. His whip is .71, and he has an ERA of 1.06. I really like this guy. I was hesitant on him early on when his first 2 starts because he couldn't get past the 5th inning, but he's only given up 2 runs in all 3 of his starts combined. So like I said, I'm really high on him. He does get a hot hitting Toronto team next week, but like I said, he has potential there, and I would go ahead and roll the dice, especially if you're in need and you have one of those many pitchers on the IL. The next one here is Vince Velasquez. This is Justin's guy. He'll always agree with this pickup. He's owned in less than 50% of CBS leagues. He gets Cincinnati and Washington next week. Cincinnati can be hot at home. Washington's been not great as far as hitting. All right, in his last start, he pitched 6 innings, gave up 3 hits, got 5 strikeouts. His ERA is 2.94, and that's definitely will play. He's pitching a lot better this year than he has in years past. He has been known to kind of fall off a cliff like mid-year, whether it's being wore down or tired or whatnot. But I would ride him while he's hot. Ryan Weathers with San Diego. He's a rookie, was making a few spot starts here and there. But with all the injuries going around, he's managed to stick around in the rotation much longer than they originally planned, and he's actually piggybacked some of the starts with Lamet. They've been kind of going, starter 1 and starter 2 in the same games, but he does get 2 starts next week against the Cubs and the Mets. Both of those lineups don't really scare me. I wouldn't worry about that as from a pitching perspective. I think both matchups are fairly decent. He does have a WHIP under 1, and he does have a ERA under 1.5. That's a pretty good combo there. Matt Peacock, he's my guy. He does pitch tonight, so we don't have the results of his stat outing yet. But I'm sure he'll go out and pitch, give up no runs and probably pitch a complete game shutout. So go ahead and pencil that in. Hopefully you played him in DFS. But anyhow, he's a guy that came up. He hasn't pitched deep into games yet. Yeah, like I said, his numbers so far is pretty impressive. And with the one exception of a Colorado game where he gave up 7 runs. Taking that out of the equation, his ERA is under 2 and his WHIP's under 1. So, like I said, it's something to. I like him as a starter. Then Tucker Davidson for Atlanta. Atlanta right now has 4 starters in their rotation because of all their injuries. They haven't had a need for a 5th starter in a while, but Tucker Davidson did pitch well in his only start of the year. So like I said, I envision him getting called up potentially next week, and I would just jump to the beat everybody to the punch there and go ahead and preemptively pick him up. In his one start, he did pitch against the Mets, 6 innings, 3 earned runs. He had 5 hits, 5 strikeouts. Like I said, I think he can improve on that for next week. Probably will get Washington, my guess. But like I said, that's still kind of up in the air. What do you guys think?
So I like the Gantt. I like the coming off a good start going against LA, who hasn't lived up their potential. Like you said, Bellinger should be back for this one, so we'll see what happens. I have to know the opposing pitcher there, though. I think it's still a little bit risky. I like Poteet. He's going against a good offense. He's not a big strikeout guy, but mixes up his pitch as well. He's got 4 pitches and he doesn't throw one pitch overwhelmingly, a bunch. So he mixes it up good. Velasquez, I like, like you said, with the Reds, they could put 20 on the board. Or they could, have 20 strikeouts. It's a good list overall. The only one I don't really like is the Ryan Weathers pick. Only because, they've limited his starts to 4 innings, so not enough for a win, not enough for a quality start.
And he's the one guy I like on this list.
Really?
Yes. I mean,
so he's going to help your. Hey, don't get me wrong, he's going to help your ratios here, but his strikeouts are coming down as hitters are figuring him out. And they're gonna pull him before 5th inning. So he's not gonna get you any win here, and he's not gonna get you a quality start. So,
all right, dude, this is why I like him. He throws 97 from the left side. It's all about health for him. I mean, he's got great matchups with the Cubs and the Mets. Give me 8 innings of Ryan Weathers next week, and I'll take what I get over all these other pitchers. I mean, I really like Vince Velasquez from a standpoint. This is good matchups. And if I'm in a weekly league, he's going to give me some Ks. But Ryan Weathers could turn into that guy I want to hang on to longer than this year. And for me, the guy I'm out on is Matt Peacock.
You were out on him last week too. So
yeah,
that's all right.
5 ERA, in the minors doesn't translate to the pros. Cody, I'm going to be honest. You've made me want to look at him a little deeper to make a little bit of a better understanding of where he's coming from. But going against Toronto in that park in Buffalo, I'm saying no way next week. John Gantt, he's another guy. I like him too. For some reason, he keeps his ERA down despite walking everybody in the park. He has good stuff. If you could ever learn to keep his walks down to 3 per game, he would be a really good starter. And I agree with you with Tucker Davidson. I like Bryce Wilson as well in Atlanta. I think either or of those pitchers could come up and fill some roles and do good things. But Justin, I'm Ryan Weathers fan. So
yeah.
Hey man, he's on one of my rosters, and I like him, but I don't know. Right now, it's a tough place for me because I know he's not going to get me a win. And if I'm in a league with quality starts, he's not going to get me a quality start because they're only going to pitch him 4 innings.
Trade him to Rich or me.
I get that point.
But, I did forget this. I did forget to point out the Matt Peacock pick. Just like last week, I'm against this one. I'm with Rich on this one.
He's going to throw a no-hitter tonight. He's going to be added to that list of no-hitters.
You double down on Matt Peacock. That's what's bad about it here.
They got
Double
I'm
down.
deleting this whole conversation depending on what happens. All right. Anyhow, we can move on here. Anyhow, relievers are kind of an underutilized position in most fantasy leagues. You have everybody is all over the closers, and rightfully so, because of that category of the ever precious save. But relievers are often overlooked, and some of them have really good ratios that can help your team. And even like guys like Hader and a few of them guys can actually help your K totals as well, and they shouldn't be overlooked. And especially this year, it seems like with the extra inning rules and all the close games, that relievers are playing more and more of a factor in the decision of the game than starters. At least I haven't any empirical data on this, but a lot of these relievers are getting the win rather than the starters. And some of these relievers that I want to point out today might be somebody you pick up. First one is Kyle Crick for Pittsburgh. He's on my list because I think he had the huge potential to become the closer. Pittsburgh's obviously not competing. They have Richard Rodriguez. He's been lights out. In fact, the entire Pittsburgh bullpen has been lights out. And that's even what I think for the most part, that's why they've been winning as many games as they have, is because of their bullpen. They're going to be sellers at the deadline. Richard Rodriguez is probably going to be dealt, especially with the season he's having. Grant Kyle Crick could be dealt as well, but I think before the end of the year, he'll be in line to pick up some saves. The next one is Giovanni Galagos, which I believe we've talked about a few times on this show. He has an ERA under 2. He has a WHIP about 0.7. Not bad. He's gotten a save this year. He's gotten 2 wins. He's got more Ks than he does innings pitched, which is always a nice trait to have. But he's been a very solid member of that staff. And everybody was looking at Jordan Hicks at the beginning of the year. He went down. So Galagos has been the main setup guy for Reyes. Trevor May, definitely been worth the money, the signing that they've paid him in the offseason, a 2.5 ERA. His whip is a little high at 1.22, but he's steadily been bringing his ratios down since a disastrous start to the season. But he's been really good in that Mets bullpen ever since that start of the year. Blake Treinen, I don't know whether you've noticed, but LA has been giving a lot of saves to closers other than Jensen. And part of that is because they're a really good team and they get a lot of wins. So they're in line for a lot of saves, and their bullpen's really good. They have a lot of good setup guys. I think Jensen's been rested a little bit more than he has in recent years, which has given these other closers the opportunity for saves. He's got 2 saves on the year. He has an ERA under 2, and about a 1.2 WHIP. Like I said, he'd be the first one in line, I believe, if Jensen did need a IL stint. Even if he doesn't go on the IL, he's still in line for the occasional save here or there. TJ Anton, he has quietly been the best reliever on the Reds staff. He's been the best pitcher on the team. And that's saying something because they do still have a pretty decent staff, Luis Castillo aside. But his ERA is a 1.7, a WHIP under 0.7, and I have to look here. He hasn't given up a run since the beginning of May, where he gave up 4 runs against the Cubs. But he's been absolutely dominant ever since then, and he's pretty much dominant all year long. He's gotten 2 saves on the season and a win. He's gotten 34 strikeouts in 26 innings. Those are really good ratios. Like I said, I think David Bell he's been mixing and matching people in the closer role. Granted, the Reds haven't been in a position to get a lot of saves. He's one of those guys. He's closer by committee, depending on the matchups and where the lineup that he's needed the most. This is where he's going to pitch. So TJ Antone may be picked up in a lot of leagues, but if he's not, that would probably be my first pickup as far as this list is concerned. What do you guys think?
Well, they call you the closer whisperer for a reason. So I love all these guys. I think if I had Reese or Reyes, I would definitely be trying to trade for Gio and get him on my roster right now because I would want him to be my backup. Kyle Crick, I'm 100% with you. Richard Rodriguez will not be with Pittsburgh after July 15th. And the next guy up is Kyle Crick, though he could be dealt as well. And there's another guy on there called David Bednar, who's really good and could be the third guy up. Trevor May, I mean, he produces, Blake Trennan, TJ Anton. I agree 100%. They all should be rostered for you. What's your thought, Justin?
Yeah, I agree. I kind of shied away from Trennan a little bit at the beginning of the year. I think we talked about this last week because he was just giving up too many hits and walks, and his whip was through the roof, and it kept happening. But he settled down now, and he's back to his normal self. And all these guys are a must roster at this point. But the only thing I would add is I would watch for Galagos. I don't, depending on how much longer Hicks is out, which I think he's going to be out till July. I don't know if you all saw this, but yesterday during the Cardinals game, they actually confiscated Galagos' hat.
Really?
And took it in. Yeah, and they found a foreign substance on there. So if they find, he could have a suspension coming if they find something illegal there.
Well, I know they did that with Bauer earlier in the year, and to be honest with you, I would say 60 to 70% of the pitchers out there in the league has some type of foreign substance on.
Yeah,
on
it don't matter. I'm just saying, before you pick up Galagos, watch that story if you're only picking up for a streamer. That's all I'm saying.
Good point.
Guys, we wanted to talk about what's going on in the near future and how it affects fantasy. So we're going to talk about buyers and sellers in the NL Central. It's probably the most interesting division, even though not the best division in the NL. So wanted to kind of talk about it. Right now, today, as we speak, the Cards are in first place with 27 wins, 22 losses. Cubs are second, 25-22. Brewers are third, but gaining at 24-24. And the Reds are fourth at 21-25 out of it. And then the Pirates, we don't even talk about. So I kind of wanted to break it down by the most interesting team, and that's the Cubs. Do they buy? Do they sell? And I think the reality is, last year's this was Theo Epstein's team. This year's Jed Hoyer's team. What does Jed do? He wants to make his mark. So right now, as of today, on the books for this year, they have Anthony Rizzo. They have Javier Baez. They have Chris Bryant and Jock Peterson on offense. All of these guys will be free agents next year. That's $50 million that comes off the books next year. So what do they do with these guys? Who do they sign? Who do they bring back? As far as pitching, they have Greg Kimbrell, Zach Davies, Jake Arrieta. They got $25 million coming off the books. For me, it's a no-brainer. They're going to probably try to play we want to win, but game. We want to win, but we really want to sell our players and get something back for them. So who do they want to keep? For me, it's going to be Javi Baez. They're going to keep Javier Baez. I think they're going to try to make a run at Rizzo, but their first run was 5 years, $70 million. That's not going to get it done. Chris Bryant is out the door, and Jock Peterson's out the door. So for me, why not do it now and get something of value? Chris Bryant's $19 million. He signed with Scott Boras. I know that we've got another month before the trading season comes into play. But if the Cubs are still 3 or 4 games back, their pitching is not good enough to win a World Series or even get to a World Series. If we look at the 10 or so teams that can make the playoffs, 12 teams, the Cubs pitching has got to be either last or toward the last when you look at their pitching. I'm at depth. I mean, they have Hendricks, they have Zach Davies, and then Pray for Rain. And those are good pitchers, but they're not ones and twos. So to me, the first move is let Kimbrel go. And what that does, it opens up a spot for who's going to be the reliever past him. If they don't add anybody, the guy in the bullpen that's going to get the job is probably Ryan Tapia. He's got good numbers. There's also talk of Dylan Maples, but he has a history of walking too many. Is a little bit on the young side. Tapia is the guy. There's also talk of Andrew Chafin, who's a lefty, but he's one of the only lefties. He's also could be on the move. When I'm looking at the Cubs, they're going to be selling because what do the Cubs need? Good young players. And what do they lack? A lot of good young players, and they lack pitching. So I look for the Cubs to definitely deal Greg Kimbrel by the All-Star break. I look at them to definitely deal one of the three when I'm looking at Rizzo, Baez, or Bryant. And the most logical guy is Bryant.
They're in a really tough spot. Like you said, I think their GM is probably, secretly, quietly inside waiting to trade his pieces to get some prospects in return. But man, they're only half a game back right now. There's no way they can sell anybody right now.
I totally agree with you.
You know what that does to the integrity of the game? Do you know what that would do to those fans in Chicago? Can you imagine if that was your team and a half game back and you just started giving up on the season and trading and selling it? You talk about repercussions. I mean, I just they can't do it right now. Do I think they'll keep this pace? No. Like you said, you already covered it. We talked about it in the podcast before the season started, how bad their pitching is. And then Zach Davies has been nowhere near what everybody thought he would do in Chicago. And Kyle Hendricks, for that matter, as well, is well underperformed to what his standard is. But
so let me ask you a question. They're saying they're a game and a half out. What if they're 5 games out July 1? Do they sell then? Or do they stick with the team?
Do you guys ever watch the movie Major League? I'm sure you both have.
Yeah.
Where the ownership was wanting them to tank so they could move the team from Cleveland to Miami. That's kind of like this.
That's what this is.
Except that they're not going to move to Miami. They want the team to suck so they can tear it down, save some money, and start the rebuild. But like being a half a game back here, you can't do that at the end. Like everybody would everybody would revolt, and there might even be repercussions from Major League Baseball, like behind the curtains. Like there's no way they tear that down at this point. Like if they do go on if they do lose, 8 out of 10 or something like that, that's a different story.
So,
but
what about just trading 1 or 2 guys? What about trading Kimbrel and Bryant?
I don't think you can. I think they have to add, or at least make it look like they're adding.
Yeah, I'm with you, Aaron. I mean, right now, today, a half game back, they can't trade anybody. They got to go for it, man. I mean,
one of the cardinal rules of fantasy sports for me is to look at the beginning of the year, look at the players in a contract year, and at least start moving them up in your rankings just based on always wanting to perform well in a contract year so they can get that next paycheck. And that's one thing I don't think we really thought about as much as we should have, especially with the Cubs, because like half their team, their contract is up this year, especially Chris Bryant. And Chris Bryant has been showing why that freaking contract year is so important to consider. He's been money all year. He's trying to win his second MVP. Don't think he's going to do it, but he's at least trying. And him and that offense is carrying that team.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think if they were 5-6 games back right now, they would have already traded Bryant.
They might have, yeah.
Because I mean, right now is when they're going to get the most value out of him. At this point in the season, he's performed like he hasn't performed in 3 years. I mean, we were writing him off.
Yeah.
And here he is back, and management's like, damn, we got to trade this guy, but we can't because we're only half game back. They're in a rough spot, man. But right now they can't sell. They just can't. There's no way.
We'll see. It's a great question, though. We'll see.
A lot could happen though. We still have we still have 4 weeks to go, man.
4 or 5 weeks. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, they could be 10 games out by July 1st, and they're gonna, like you said, they're gonna be. We know they're gonna at that point they're gonna be selling.
I think if they're 4 or 5 games out, they're selling. To me, there's not a question, but we'll see. It's a good debate. My next team that I really like is the Milwaukee Brewers, and the reason I like them is they're 24-24, but everybody's coming back. The team's getting back together. I mean, you got to start with Yelich. It's back. Colton Wong's been hurt. He's back. Keston Hura went to the minor leagues and only hit like 450 with like a 1400 OPS, and now
he was out with a bad case of suckitis.
They sent him down and he freaking lit it up, man.
Lorenzen Cain has been kind of slow, but he's always been a consistent 280, 290, 300 hitter. Milwaukee's going to come back a little bit stronger in the second half. They're a team that actually has the flexibility to add somebody if they needed to. I mean, when you look at their 1-2, when I look at their 1-2 of Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns, man, let me put them against anybody 1-2 in a 5-game series, and they're going to be tough to beat with their bullpen because then they're going to throw Hader at you. They're going to throw Devin Williams at you. They're going to throw Bruce Sutter at you. I mean, there'd be a tough team to beat, especially if that offense kind of gels in the second half. They'll be a tough team to come across. And then, so I think the Brewers will be, I think they're kind of in a hold state right now. But if there's that piece that's out there that they could add, I think the Brewers could add something if that helps them helps their team get across and take that next step up. Because the Brewers, they don't have a lot of payroll geared toward next year, 2022. Their team is on the up. Their biggest weakness has been offense, not pitching. So I really like the Brewers to come back in the second half and overcome the Chicago Cubs for second. What do y'all think?
No, I'm with you there. I mean, we know their pitching is great. We've got a couple high-end starters. Their bullpen is one of the best in the league. Getting their stars back, they could use a couple spots to upgrade, like you said. They've already traded for Willie Thomas. They could really use an upgrade and probably right field and first base. So I'm with you. I see them making a move because we talked about it before. The NL Central with the National League, it's almost a given that the wild cards are going to go to the NL East and NL West. So the NL Central teams, if you want to make the playoffs, you're going to have to win the division.
If Keston Hur comes back and plays first base, like we think he potentially can, 250 hitter with 35 to 40 bombs, he comes back. Yelich becomes Yelich,
mm-hmm.
and Adames just becomes what he's been in the past for Tampa. This is a lot different team than it was in the first half. A lot better team.
Quick question. Who has the most quality starts in the National League?
So far this year or last year?
So far this year.
I have no idea.
Probably Scherzer.
Brandon Woodruff.
Does he?
The guy has been money.
I think Scherzer's got 6 or 7 already.
Scherzer has 6.
And
Bauer and Gosman has 8. Woodruff has 9.
Who does Woodruff play for, Aaron? I'm just curious. Is it your team?
Yes, he does.
I was wondering about that.
I picked him up like at the last second, and I made a lot of stupid moves over the offseason, but that wasn't one of them.
Well, you did give up Trevor Bauer. I just want to point that out.
I guess I made a lot of stupid moves over the offseason, but like I said, Woodruff was not one of them.
All right, the last two teams
But-
I wanted to talk about.
But let me say something about the Brewers
Yeah.
real fast. So anyhow, Woodruff has been absolutely on fire. He's been money. In my estimation, he's the NL Cy Young. If the vote stopped today, he's my vote. Granted, I am a little biased because he's on my fantasy team, but still, like I said, he's been money. He low ERA, WHIP. He has the strikeouts, quality starts. He has it all. They need to get some more production out of their lineup if they're going to compete. That means Jackie Bradley can't be hitting 160. He has to get off the interstate. He has to go up. He has to climb north and get off the interstate. If he does that, like the teams will be much better off. And Hira, you mentioned him, and Yelich is back. I say if they start getting the production that they should be getting, then I still think they're the team to beat in the Central. There's 2/3 of the season still remaining, so there's plenty of time to catch the Cardinals.
And I feel like the Cardinals are the class of the division. I mean, they have the history, they have the names. I mean, when you start looking at their lineup, when you go Goldschmidt, Arenado on offense, then you take in Flaherty in pitching and Carlos Martinez, and then you got Reyes and Galagos. I mean, to me, the Cardinals are the team to beat, and they're also a team that I think could be buyers. Where they're weak at is in the outfield. I mean, Dylan Carson has done a great job of stepping up and making his name known, but they're still weak in the outfield. I can see them going out and picking up an outfielder. When you look at the books, they have almost $15 million coming off next year for Dexter Fowler, so they could definitely add somebody and take on that extra payroll next year. So if they added somebody long term, I like them. And then I want to talk about your Reds because this is really what I want to talk about.
That was your pick for the NL Central lead, by the way.
How wrong was I?
21. Well, you're wrong yet, but it's looking that you may be wrong.
21 and 25. They're maxed out on salary. They're so maxed out they couldn't even sign Freddie Galvis to play shortstop. So we have multiple guys playing shortstop because they don't think Kyle Farmer can do it every day. So we don't have a steady shortstop. We've got good players on the Reds, some of them who are not performing. We're maxed out on salary. What are we going to do? Well, the best player on the Reds right now is the guy that's probably going to lead the Reds, and that's Nicholas Castellanos. He has an opt-out out of this year, and he can sign a new contract, become a free agent. He has, I think, $34 million owed to him for the next 2 years. He's going to opt out and do the Marcell Ozuna deal and get a bigger deal, at least get an extra 2 years added on to that. He's going to be somebody that I would look to trade because we're not going to win this year. So we need to get something. We also, when we're looking at the Reds, we got to look a little deeper because getting rid of one guy, it still puts us, because we did sign a long-term deal with Joey Votto, and we're still stuck in kind of a bad deal. And I know he's your guy, Justin. Mike Moustakas, who we owe $34 million over the next 2 years. And to be honest, if we let him go as a free agent right now, he'd be lucky to get $14 million over the next 2 years. So we're going to have to bundle somebody to get out of this mess. And so to me, that means we're going to have to look at bundling. We're going to have to trade Nick Castellanos, and we're going to have to bundle, say, a Sonny Gray, who we have under contract for 21 and 22, with maybe a Mike Moustakas, so we can free up another $25 million that we can sign some free agents to help us or develop our minor league players. Because when you look at it, if you look at our outfield, we're fairly solid. We have We have Jesse Winker. We have Nick Senzel, Tyler Naquin, which was a great pickup. We got Shohei Akami. So they're all going to be on the roster next year. We're good in outfield. We can easily lose Castellanos and be okay. Our trouble is we still have some issues in the infield. We're still stuck with Joey Votto at $25 million a year for forever. But this is a team. This is a team that's got some good pitching, but we need to make some big moves if we want to get over the hump, or we can continue just letting Castellanos go and then trying to take that 14 million divided up between 5 players when we really need, we need more than one player to get us to where we need to go. So we're going to have to free up some more space because this is a team that has a limited budget. We're at 122 million. Maybe that budget's a little higher, a little lower, but on an annual basis, the Reds has spent anywhere from like 110 to 130. They've been consistent in that range. This is a team that needs to make a decision about who it is. I mean, whether it's becoming like a transaction team like Tampa, where we're always trading players, but we're going to have to think outside the box. We need to either trade a Wade Miley, I wouldn't trade Tyler Miley, but I wouldn't trade Luis Castillo. To me, the guy's Sonny Gray, but let's trade some players, free up some space so we can make some moves in the future. I really wanted to hear y'all about the Reds. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I agree with you. They're going to be selling. They're 4.5 back. Castillo looks at this point broken. When guys are rocking his changeup, which is his best pitch, and it looks like there's no fix to that. I mean, it's a big letdown. But I agree with you. Castellanos, as much as a Reds fan as I'd like to keep him, he's going to opt out because he can get more money, so he's a trade target. But I think the second guy that's going to go is Barnhart, because when you look at his numbers, his batting average on balls in play right now is just through the roof, right? It's like 480 or something crazy, which is spiking his average. It's going to come back down to earth, but right now he's a perfect sell high candidate. And we all know Tyler Stevenson's the future, so I think Barnhart's going to be a trade candidate. And then, like you said, one of the pitchers, they're going to have to get rid of somebody. Whether it be Castillo or Gray, I don't know that anybody would want Castillo right now. Gray seems to be the candidate. He seems to be the one that you might be able to get the most for. But between him or Malley, I think one of them is gonna be gone for sure. But it's good and bad. It's good because they have some really good signs, and they're coming from the minor leaguers. They got Lodolo and Hunter Green are absolutely just tearing up the minors right now. So good signs from them, but they're at a point where what are they going to do? They're not going to spend any more money. They've already told us that because they didn't spend any money in the offseason. So
Yeah, I unfortunately agree with you. I think you can't trade Luis Castilla at this point. Like the time to trade him was last year or the year before last. Wade Miley, I think, is a number one trade target. Castellanos, as you guys mentioned, is a trade target. I think if the Reds are going to tear it down, then they should probably tear it down. Sonny Gray should go. Amir Garrett should probably go. And if in order to get those prospects that you need to rebuild your team, I'd even go Jesse Winker. Him and Castellanos has been the 2 hottest hitters in the league, bar a couple players. Like they have. I haven't seen. Well, granted, I'm not old enough to see. I can't imagine 2 better players hitting back to back since Maris and Mantle. Like I said, they're not the Bash. they are like the Bash brothers of the Midwest. They've been killing it, and like I said, if they're your hottest pieces, they can probably get you the most prospects in return, and you could probably even get some major league ready prospects if you were to deal those 2. You're not dealing Votto because he has a 10-5 guy. Suarez, I think if he is able to turn it around, like I said, I would do a fire sale. If you're going to tear it down right, then take some time and build it back up. I was okay with them when they started, spending a little bit of money here and there, but I do think they ended up trading a few too many prospects there. I think that just Josiah Gray trade, as well as Jeter Downs.
Shooter
Yeah,
down. Yeah.
they shouldn't have traded Gray and Downs at all. I think that's going to come back to bite them in the ass, especially when Downs turns out to be, the next coming of Nomar Garciaparra. But anyhow, like I say, if you're going to tear it down right. It's too early to say that they're going to go full tear down, but I think the signs are definitely pointing that direction.
When they did that, I really didn't have a problem with it because they were going all in. They were taking a shot. It just didn't work out. When you look at it, Mike Moustakas is a lot better player than he's turned out to be the last couple of years. Suarez hasn't produced like he should have. I mean, there's lots of reasons why it didn't come together. But I mean, I think the time is now. They're going to have to they can't just make one move and that be it. They're going to have to make multiple moves to reset this team. And they do have, like Justin said, they have a lot of good prospects. They have a lot of good pitching prospects. Tyler Molly is a great prospect. T. John Anton is a great prospect. They have some good pitching. I mean, even after giving up, say, somebody like Sonny Gray, who really don't want to give up, but you're going to have to make some of these moves to free up some space. You're going to have to give up somebody that's cost control for 2 years to maybe even move Moustakas, or you're going to have to move Suarez and move Moustakas to third base. But this team that really needs to take a hard look at itself and decide where it's going in the near future, because right now, without doing anything, this team's in trouble.
With all the injuries that's going around the league, they could, if assuming that like Suarez and all their big bat like Winker and Castellanos continue to hit, they could probably get some pretty good returns based on these teams that like the Mets that are inundated with injuries, and the Dodgers and all these other teams that are inundated with all these injuries. They could probably get a pretty good return for a lot of these guys if they're willing to pony up. And like I said, I'm kind of hoping that they do. Like you gotta deal something in order to get something in return. They got some, Tyler Naquin, who's been a good pickup for him. They've got Mark Payton, Scott Heineman that they could play in the outfield. You already mentioned Akiyama. They've got players to fill in. They're not, household names, but I think, like if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right. But yeah, I think you're right. The Sonny Gray is probably a very likely candidate to go. I don't I don't know whether Castellanos, the owner, is ready to sell it all, but he should be.
I think he should be, and I think you're right about Barnhart. I think the one thing about Barnhart, he's only $4 million, and I guess he is a fan favorite there in Cincy. So, I mean, that's the hard part. You're going to have to give up somebody to get somebody.
All right, let's move on. I put together a few DFS tips for Friday, May 28th. Some potential team stacks. Milwaukee's starting to hit a much better with what we've already talked about in this episode. They get Leicester and the Nationals on Friday. I think it's probably a really good team to stack some hitters against Leicester. The White Sox have been a really good hitting team. They get Matt Harvey and the Orioles on Friday. Harvey's been a batting tee for most teams. Oviedo against the Diamondbacks. I think the Diamondbacks, there's a lot of hitters there you could probably stack. Marte, Pavin Smith, and a few others. So those are potential options to look at. There was a lot of TBA pitchers for Friday, so a lot of that could change. So anyhow, as far as pitchers, you get Cole against Detroit and Lamet against Houston. Cole in that game with a dozen strikeouts. So I think he had a really bad outing the last time out, but I think he gets it right against Detroit here. Thanks everyone for listening. Don't forget to email us at mvp@fantasyknuckleballers.com. Check us out on Twitter at fknuckleballers and our website at fantasyknuckleballers.com. Thank you guys for listening. Don't forget to hit the like button and check us out. Check our other podcasts out as well as our upcoming ones.